We've spent since the 1950s learning how to speak the language of computers, and we're about to go into a world where the computers have learned to speak our language. We've been on a journey from really knowing what's going on. Today, it's all in the cloud. We have no idea what hardware, what operating system, where anything is. The languages have libraries, they're interpreted. I'm completely abstracted with Salesforce from what's going on for multiple levels. And it started to become obvious that the next layer of abstraction that was going to hit us was going to be AI.
Welcome to Salesforce Radio, your destination for insights, news, and community connections within the dynamic Salesforce ecosystem. Welcome to the podcast. It's really a pleasure to have here today Joseph Kubon and Andy Forbes. And thanks for joining us.
You bet.
Thank you for having us, Ben.
Well, just as a way of introduction, maybe a few words about yourselves and maybe a little bit about why we're speaking to both of you today.
Joseph?
Sure. My name's Joseph Kubon. I am now a 3-time Salesforce MVP. I've been in the ecosystem about...
And congratulations, Joseph. I saw that announcement.
Thank you. The renewal was Friday, Ben. So 3 times MVP, 40 times certified technical architect. I'm the global VP of platform architecture, Salesforce platform architecture at Astound Digital in New York City, global SI. I love the ecosystem. I believe in, hashtag be a trailblazer, and on the trailblazer community, look to be involved and help coach and mentor others.
Yep. And I'm obviously Andy Forbes. I fell into Salesforce literally 22 years ago now. And I wish I could tell you I had some vision of what it was going to be. I just had a VP of sales that needed an inexpensive tool for knowing what his salespeople around the world were up to. Subsequently to that, worked for a bunch of different companies, eBay for a while, most recently Capgemini, where I'm currently the Capgemini America Salesforce CTO.
Wonderful. Both of you have had long careers in the Salesforce ecosystem. I myself only really joined up into the world of Salesforce back in 2020 during the pandemic, which was also an exciting time to join. Looking back now at this point, seeing how things have kind of changed over the last couple of years. And I'm sure we can get into some of the, current trends and things that we're seeing, especially with all of the new AI innovation, which as I was at App Exchange Live in London on Thursday, speaking to customers from Europe mostly, obviously AI is still, now that we're midway into the first quarter or almost farther than midway into the first quarter of 2024, people are still talking about it. This is still on everyone's mind. It is still what people are speaking of. And I just spoke with another consultant a moment ago who was saying, listen, this consultancy that I work for, they build everything based on their old, the model of 3 years ago. And I think they're in for a rude awakening in about a year from now. So it's still on all of our minds. And I know this is something that both of you have really talked about a lot and written about in your book, which we can get to in a moment. But I'd love to hear just a little bit of those personal journeys from both of you into the Salesforce ecosystem. Joseph, when you talk about being 30 times certified, that is a huge accomplishment and not something that we come across every day. So, I would love to hear about, I guess, also even when you got that first certification, when that took place.
Sure. So I was a business analyst at iHeart Radio when Bob Pittman, our CEO, if you all Google Bob Pittman, he's done some small things in his career in the media space. He created America Online, probably heard of that, and MTV. And so he was at the helm at iHeart Radio, and he had asked us for a report on who the largest advertisers were. And we were 180 disparate, disconnected radio markets. And we would have to export spreadsheets to add up how much Coca-Cola, Disney, Home Depot were spending with us. And he gave us about 30 days to go figure that out. We ended up taking 3 months and doing a blueprint on Salesforce, but I knew the radio business from start to finish. So I got selected to be on this project, the CRM Blueprint project, and introduced to Salesforce. From there, it was a skyrocket for me. I loved the platform, the dynamic pieces of the platform. I had been a BA for 20 years and not a coder. So configuration and the ability to do things was appealing to me. I could manage some of the delivery myself. I didn't need a developer, right? And I got interested in the idea of always building the scenarios, always looking at the edge cases. And I knew officially I'd be an architect when I was in a meeting room with the team, and the project manager at the end of the table said, Joseph, your laptop is blocking the projector. And so I moved the projector. The room was like a little bit taken aback. I didn't just close my laptop. And I said to the room, what did everybody see? Only one solution. So at that time, I knew I'd be an architect, and it was a matter of getting the right pieces into place. I got mentored by a great technician architect at Salesforce named John Frum. Moises Cuellar, my director of or vice president of development at iHeart, taught me about coding and architecture principles, and it was just skyrocketing. And so like ultimately over the 14 years, the certifications have accumulated based on project experience. If I needed to know how to do a PDF, you can do PDFs now in some Lightning Web components, but you could do PDFs with OmniScripts out of Omni Studio. And so I needed to know how to do that for an enterprise customer. So I learned Omni Studio. You're going to be an architect. And one of the things I like to say, I have a blog coming out just after TDX. I'm in a series right now in blogs about the book. There's first official mention of the book. But technician's knowledge is a mile deep and an inch wide. And an architect's knowledge is the inverse, a mile wide and an inch deep, because we have to have a broad spectrum. And so it just began absorbing all of those different pieces. And that's sort of the journey of, from a BA to an admin to developer to a product owner to an architect to, helping run a global practice now, how architecture should be done. That's me. Andy's got a much more interesting story. He got involved before there were computers, right, Andy?
Not quite that early, Joseph.
Or before there was a cloud.
Yes. I am old enough to collect Social Security, so I've been doing this for a while. So in a nutshell, my career started programming IBM mainframes with punch cards and has gone from mainframes to mini computers to PCs to network PCs to in-tier architectures to the internet and the cloud through mobile and now to AI. As I mentioned earlier, Salesforce was first 2002, and it was a VP who we hired. I was working at a turnaround as part of a team that raised some money for a robotics turnaround. And we had a VP that came out of industry and where he had worked previously, they had SAP. And he came to me and he said, hey, what would it take to implement SAP so I could manage my salespeople? And I said, more money than we raised to turn this company around. How about I find you an inexpensive CRM tool that will get the job done? Because I'd been reading about Salesforce. And that's where we got started. I've been doing this long enough, guys, that I to this day, if you say to me, Andy, what is one really cool thing about Salesforce? When I started using Salesforce, you couldn't edit a page by clicking on a link on the page. You had to go into setup and navigate to the place on the admin screens where you could edit the page. So even today, for me, one of the coolest things about Salesforce is you can be looking at a page and you can go click and you can start to play with the page. That is amazingly powerful for somebody that used to carry around boxes full of punch cards.
People are Googling punch cards now.
Well, that's an amazing journey. When you think about Salesforce and about the idea of having things not on premise, and it was revolutionary, obviously. And today, when I'm out wherever I am, and people are asking me what I do, and I explain, hey, I work for a solution for Salesforce, and people say, well, what's Salesforce? And then I start explaining, and I start with, hey, there's this guy Mark Benioff, and you start kind of from the beginning, and you start with, hey, talking about the cloud. And today, the idea of the cloud is the easiest thing to explain to someone because everyone interacts with it multiple times a day in one way or another on this cloud or that cloud. And that was one of his hardest pitches, right? I mean, that was one of the hardest things about getting people's head around the idea of Salesforce was that where's the servers going to be? We're not going to go in and do this big implementation. And now today, if I try to explain to someone who is not so tech savvy about some system that needs to be on premise, that's actually harder for them to understand. And I think that's an amazing revolution that's taken place, just over basically 2 decades. I mean, maybe a little bit more at this point. But when was it, for both of you, that you felt that the idea of interacting with the cloud and cloud storage, when did that become something that was more normal in the space?
So mine was actually, a little bit before that, I'm going to show this antique over here. This is an iPod Nano. And it was 2006, May of 2006. And I got invited to a meeting at 2:00 in the afternoon in the Fishbowl. This was a conference room we had with 3 walls were glass. Everyone could always look what was going on in there. They sat us down. Every chair had this NDA agreement, and everybody was told to read the NDA agreement and sign it before the meeting commenced. And up at the front of the room were executives from iHeartRadio, or Clear Channel Communications, as it was called at that time, and Apple. And they told us we were going to build this iPod Nano, and it was going to be able to stream and put on pictures of your artwork, of the albums you were playing, listening to the radio, and you'd be able to push this button and buy the song from iTunes. And everything was going to be in the cloud. You get the music from iTunes, and inevitably we built this. The technology behind this, among of half a dozen different patents around how to enrich metadata for the cloud, bringing together unified, what people call now in Salesforce or CDP or Data Cloud, the unified profile of a person in the cloud for Salesforce. I was doing in 2006 for song titles and artwork so that you could display the right Born in the USA album cover if that was playing on the radio. So that was my introduction almost 25 years ago. Andy?
You're making me feel so old, guys, because in 1977, I was taking a programming class in high school. And when I was supposed to be writing Algol and macro and Fortran programs, instead what I was doing was connecting from my high school to the local university, from the local university to a local Air Force base, to the local Air Force base to Los Alamos, and from Los Alamos to Stanford, where there was a text game called Adventure. And I'd spend all my time playing Adventure instead of actually doing the programming work I was supposed to be doing.
How can that be? When did Al Gore invent the internet?
But remember ARPANET. I mean, it's been around since the late 60s. They started connecting the computers, and I just happened to be, like I said, I went to high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we were very close to UNM, and we could connect to UNM, and from there to Kirtland, to Los Alamos, to Stanford, because back in the day, I mean, no one had Norton, no one had firewalls. It all just kind of connected. I mean, I probably should rue the day that one of my classmates showed me how to get to Adventure.
Do you have a picture of 1972, Andy? Were you the inspiration for Matthew Broderick in War Games?
Not yet, but a lot of those old movies, I'm like, yeah, I kind of get that. But that was, look, but again, back in the day, very few people had access to ARPANET, and I'm not sure we were necessarily supposed to, but it was a different world. It's a very different world. Now that I've named some of the places I went through, I suppose I should expect a phone call.
They finally found you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like Broderick, it was just to have fun. It's not we were looking for trouble, but yeah, it was all open. So fall of 77 is when I started to go, wow, the world's a very different place. Summers I worked construction. I used to work for my father's firm building houses, and to go from building houses and wrenching on the Camaro I used to street race to sitting down in front of a terminal and being able to connect and play games on a computer in California was kind of eye-opening about what was coming.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of times I hear about these kind of experiences in, the mid to late 70s, early 80s. And then things jump to the mid 90s when people are talking about, dial-in networks and things like that in people's homes. What were you doing in between that time?
I've always been, when I first started, my first career was financial benchmarking surveys and for wholesale distributors at Arthur Andersen. And so I've always worked in databases and, at statistics and KPIs and crunching numbers and those sorts of things. But I quickly got into analytics and reporting, and I was the first certified Crystal reports engineer in the state of Texas in 1997. I don't even think Crystal reports became business objects, and I don't even think business objects is around anymore. So my whole career has been technologies of some sort, but I didn't really plan on it. And when I was growing up, you could see my music collection. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a record producer. Like how I ended up in technology was a practical decision around having something that could pay the bills. Like I didn't know where I would be. I don't like, we talk about pivotal career changing moments. Like if I hadn't been invited into that room on May 6th, 2006, I don't know. Like if I was on my way to see Bruce Springsteen at Jazz Fest in April of 2006, when I was on the road to New Orleans, when my headhunter called and said Clear Channel wanted to interview me. And I drove back home for the interview and then started the journey back to New Orleans a little bit later. Like if I had not turned around. So like, I don't know like what moment it became predestined to be heavily involved in technology. I guess it just always
Yep. Same for me. Different path, but same for me. Just kind of backed into it. But I said, starting in 77, did summer of 85. My roommate had a Commodore 64 bulletin board, and he bought a 1 megabyte external hard drive. And he was the man, because everybody else that was running BBSs at the time was stringing together 64K floppy drives. And Paul spent the money to get his hands, and it's like $1,000 of 1985 dollars to get a 1 megabyte external hard drive. And then, of course, deeper into ARPANET. I was actually the third Bell Atlantic customer ever for dedicated internet back in would have been 95. So I don't think it was a planned path, kind of like how I fell into Salesforce. It was just, it's what I did. And every time there was an opportunity to do something cool and interesting, I'd be like, yeah, let's give it a try.
My undergraduate degree is in accounting. That's how I even got through the door at Arthur Andersen, because I graduated with an accounting degree. And Arthur Andersen just randomly assigned me or hired me into doing surveys instead of audits, So just luck, I guess.
Right place, right time. I'd love to tell you there's a vision that I knew exactly where all this was going to end up. And I've had a plan to land where I am. But frankly, I mean, guys, I've, as Joseph knows, I was involved in a startup that was trying to do what Redbox ended up doing. I was involved in a startup that was trying to do what Uber ended up doing. Just somehow got lucky, I guess, and backed into Salesforce. Thank you, Mark.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. That's one of the main things here. So when did you guys get connected? How long has this partnership been around for?
3-4 years. Andy had been at Capgemini when I landed at Capgemini. And I guess thinking about like maybe a vision, I'm going to dovetail on that about how I met Andy, because I do tell people there's a neat little Heroku app called My North Star. And I do believe trailblazers should have a vision based around, it's their value system and whatnot. I tell that to my mentees. If I don't have a personal direction or vision for myself, how can I personally consult others? How can I tell a company where they ought to be going if I don't know where I'm going, right? And so, this is a neat little thing that they talk about. But I do think that knowing where you would go and how you're going to get there is important. So, Andy,
I got nothing more, man. I worked there. You joined. We got to work together, and then we got to write the book together.
So before we get to the book, were there any really special moments working together, any projects, any aha moments, things that happened, or was that a daily occurrence?
So Andy and I, the daily fun Andy and I would have. Andy, I hope this is good. All right. So it's for a company that shall not be named, would send us certification data about people who would take certification tests of some kind, and they register for their certification exams with their personal emails. And Andy and I on a regular basis would have to reconcile who sforcerocker@gmail.com is on the company list so that they could connect the 40 certifications to the person at Capgemini who has 40 certification, because that whole idea of a unified person in Salesforce data.
What? Sorry, huh?
What isn't necessarily transparent, so there's like right now they're working very heavily towards getting us to a Trailblazer ID. And my Trailblazer ID connects my partner profile, my MVP profile, my community group leader profile, my personal Trailblazer web assessor exam profile. All of that's connected through Trailblazer ID right now. But in 2020, when I joined CAP, and Andy and I, we on a regular quarterly annual basis have to reconcile this because, certifications matter for your partner score, your partner level. So that would be the work that we would have to do. And on a regular basis, we'd have conversations like, this has got to be easier, right? So that's how this partnership and bonding became. Yeah.
Reconciling data.
Reconciling data in spreadsheets.
Pretty much.
We've all been there. So love to hear a little bit of an introduction to the background behind the book, to you think, to how you think people could be affected by this book and could use it. Joseph, earlier you held up the book, but we didn't get the full introduction for people listening. So
yeah.
So it's ChatGPT for Accelerating Salesforce Development.
The book was brewing in the fall of 23 last year. And I think it just happened to be a few different pieces all at the same time. Andy is ultimately the mastermind who brought the team together. I don't know what might have been the first domino in all of it all, but maybe several different concurrent running conversations. He'd have to tell you what came first, the chicken or the egg. But at Dreamforce in September 2023, I did a panel with Andy Bergman from Salesforce, SVP of Trailhead, talking about how all the roles would change. All of the roles, not just developers, not just admins, not just the sales and service users. Every role would change. And so from there, as we began to ideate as a team and conceptualize the book, and I don't even think we knew what the title would be when we started. We just knew we had to touch on it from every aspect. And so Andy helped structure us into writing a book that goes from aspects of business analysts and what a product owner does to what testers do, what knowledge transfer has to occur, how organizational change management happens on a project. And so there's a chapter in this book for every single, I would say I thought the other day of one we left out, but every single role in the development life cycle. If you're a tester, there's a chapter in here. If you're a hands-on developer, there's a couple chapters about Apex and Lightning Web Components. If you're an admin who loves flow, there's a chapter on flows. It's meant so that any one person can find value in any one of the 14 chapters, but really strung together to if you can bring a team together to read the book and understand how they write better prompts and influence each other, the book is incredibly powerful. But Andy's really the architect at the foundation, pulling how he got Paco involved, how he got Philip involved. He drove our publisher PAC. We owe a great deal of gratitude and thanks to PAC.
Yep.
We put the book together. Our first meeting about the book with PAC, I remember very distinctly, was October 16th. That's the first day we met with the publisher. And the book was published December 29th, like lightning speed.
That's
for
incredible.
A publisher and authors to come together. We pushed them. They had multiple people editing the book. Philip, I think they teased me a little bit, like, Joseph, please read the whole book. I have read the whole book, but Philip and Andy read and reread the whole book repeatedly to make sure, because you had 4 authors writing different chapters and you wanted to have a consistency in the tone and the message and how people perceive it and whatnot. But Andy, how did you pick Paco and Philip?
Well, let me take a step back, guys, and I'll talk real fast for 60 seconds. Keeping in mind, first touched a computer in 1977. One of the languages I was supposed to be learning how to use was Dec 10 machine language. When I was busy playing Adventure, I should have been writing machine code. I should have been writing assembler and then algo, macro, and Fortran. I think it was Fortran 2. But keep in mind that the journey that we've been on from what I'm describing and what people did in the 1960s and early part of the 70s to today is continually abstracting us from what's really going on. When you're writing machine code, you pretty much know what's going on at the hardware level because that's what you're writing. You're literally giving it directions. The PDP 1103 that I used to work on back in the day had two 64K 8-inch floppy drives. And if the code you wrote was more than 64K, you actually had to create a separate library and it would prompt you to swap out one floppy for the other floppy. You were very aware of what was going on with the hardware. But higher level languages, I worked with PL1 for a while, and then, of course, Pascal and all the modern languages. Each step of the way, they've abstracted you from what's going on. Moving to the cloud means, look, I spent years going into a cage in a data center and swapping out pizza boxes and setting systems up. I haven't been in a data center for 15 years. There's been no need to go into a data center. So we've been on a journey from really knowing what's going on. Off the wall example, one of the IBM 360s I used to work on, some of the core memory had rusted. So you had to program around that part of core memory. Today, it's all in the cloud. I have no idea what hardware, what operating system, where anything is. The languages have libraries, they're interpreted. I'm completely abstracted with Salesforce from what's going on for multiple levels. And a couple of years ago, I started using a tool called Jarvis, at the time Jarvis AI, but Marvel threatened to sue them. So they renamed themselves to Jasper AI. It was an AI copywriting tool. And it started to become obvious that the next layer of abstraction that was going to hit us was going to be AI. It was going to move us even further away from what was really going on. Right now, we write Apex, we write flows, we configure screens. It started to become obvious that AI was going to abstract that layer away, just like previous languages had abstracted away the need to write machine language or assembly language. So I think about little over a year ago, I got hardcore into what ChatGPT, when that hit, could do for the kind of things we do, and realized that we were about to take the next step on the journey to that additional layer of abstraction. So last summer, I think Pact reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in writing a book about this? Took a couple of months, thought about it, decided that time was probably right to do it, but that writing an entire 250 or 300 page book was more work than I wanted to do myself. And I said, okay, who, if we're going to cover soup to nuts, as Joseph said, who in the company, we all worked for the same company at the time, who in the company knows configuration? Joseph came to mind. Who knows hardcore programming? Paco came to mind. Who knows some of the documentation and some of the project management level things that we do? Philip came to mind. So the deal we cut was that we stacked up what needed to be done. We built an outline. We assigned out chapters based on people's skills. And then, as Joseph said, we turned the book around very quickly. I think the publisher thought the publication date originally was going to be July of this year. I think they were very surprised when by early December, we pretty much had it done.
And was this the first time that either of you had written a book, or had you been co-authored or written a book on your own in the past?
First time a book. Andy has been a great coach and partner in helping refine blogging skills for myself and how to get a blog generated. And so he's been writing. He writes for the Forbes Council. I like to brag on Andy.
You got to say Forbes Tech Council. They get very testy. You don't say it exactly that way.
Forbes Tech Council. But this was my first foray in a book.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. I mean, LinkedIn. I blog for Capgemini on the official Capgemini blog. I belong to the Forbes Technology Council and write for them. I've been podcasting off and on since 2005. In 2005, it was a little bit harder, I suspect, Ben, than what you face today, when you had to actually use an analog phone line.
Of course.
Everything got recorded into the same soundtrack, so you couldn't edit out. Oh my gosh, it's a very different world in 2005.
Absolutely. And so tell me a little bit about your thoughts and your feelings towards the new developments coming soon and being rolled out soon, and all the way that ChatGPT and other AI tools are going to be integrated into the larger Salesforce ecosystem.
Joseph, let's start with what you're thinking.
Well, Well, I feel like I need to do hashtag safe harbor. Imagine right now, like
Yes.
imagine right now that there's a big screen, a big page in front of you with 1,000 words you can't read fast enough before we take it down, right? Because we're not responsible for Salesforce's roadmap and actual delivery of things. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think that Salesforce has to pick up the speed on getting the tools out and available to us. I think in this past week on Thursday, we saw the release of Einstein Copilot, an automated assistant. We've seen Salesforce introduce their own prompt builder. The open AI space has been very quick with GPTs, custom GPTs that they're writing now. There are some people who have built some Salesforce GPTs. I think that just over the course of the year, you're going to see more and more acceleration by Salesforce and the other companies to leverage those tools. We're good at Abbott and Costello. Andy actually believes, and he said this, I'm going to give him full credit for it, that there will be an enterprise GPT for you to have, an enterprise LLM. People will not have to build these things from scratch. They'll leverage an enterprise version like enterprise software for your HR system in Workday or PeopleSoft or Mass90, Sage Mass90. All of those, JD Edwards, all of those eventually became a full-blown ERP, SAP, all of it, Salesforce, right? Something that you used enterprise-wide. There will be an enterprise LLM. There will be an enterprise AI platform. The last chapter of the book has a story about what the future looks like, 2-3 pages in the final chapter of the book about, let me look at what we named the individual. Do you know what I'm talking about, Andy? Is it coming to you?
Oh, I remember writing that. I don't remember what the name of the character was.
Sarah. We named her Sarah. It's on page 276. And shortly, I'm going to go ahead and do this as well and share a screen. So while I read this, you'll be able to scan the QR code to go purchase the book. But in the vibrant cityscape of 2029, Sarah begins her day like many Salesforce developers of her generation with a friendly greeting to her personal AI companion, Aiden, AIDEN. Good morning, Aiden. Let's plan our day, Sarah says. Her voice fills with the anticipation of another exciting workday. Of course, Sarah, your work AI assistant, Cora, just messaged me about a priority task to update the CRM system. Would you like to start with that? Aiden responds, their voice cheerful and helpful. But the last 3 or 4 pages of the book are how Sarah goes through the day and interacts with Aiden and Cora and Lucia from the HR team on how the world is going to be. And so I think we all know the writings on the wall, mm-hmm. right? Around how our daily lives, our daily productivity will change. Do I believe that that's going to be a Salesforce branded tool on your desktop or in the cloud that you're going to, open up and go to Einstein Copilot? Or is it going to be Microsoft Copilot that they can put in the little search bar right down at the bottom of my computer next to the word search so that everything I'm doing is recorded in my Microsoft Windows operating system? Inevitably, it's going to all happen. Right, Andy?
Well, what I would say is that there's a book, Power and Prediction. If you really care about this kind of thing, you definitely want to buy it and give it a read. And what they say in Power and Prediction is that new technologies are adopted as point solutions, application solutions, and then system solutions. So we're in the point solution right now. We're not changing how we do Salesforce delivery. We're using tools, AI tools, Copilots and GPTs and the suite of Salesforce tools to write user stories, to write code, to write test classes, to write test scripts. But we're not fundamentally changing the application of our processes right now. What Joseph is talking about, and it's coming rapidly, will be work at the application level. When I have an application where it captures my requirements, and then starts suggesting user stories, starts asking questions about how to refine the user story, starts whipping up a quick prototype to let me see how it's not just a wireframe, but a working prototype to see how things are going to work. That's what's, I think, coming in the next couple of years will be a complete application. And then after that is the world that Joseph just talked about, where at the system level, all of the parts of an organization are AI enhanced, so that I'm not developing Salesforce and still having to sit down with a room full of product owners and stakeholders, but they too, their part of the business are represented by AIs. I do have a somewhat dystopian view of the world about the time that I get to retire. I have a deck that I present that basically has somebody lean over to their AI on their computer, their anthropomorphized AI on their computer, and go, hey, the VP of supply chain just asked if we can incorporate up-to-date data from the factory and from the retail outlets into his system so he can improve his ordering. And the AI goes, wait a moment. Okay, I just talked to all the other AIs. We've built it. It's tested it. Do you want me to put it in production now or wait till the evening? Not saying that's going to happen tomorrow, guys, but clearly the abstraction from writing machine language to simply saying things the way we say them. I pushed an article out via the Forbes Technology Council recently that basically said we're at an inflection point. We've spent since the 1950s learning how to speak the language of computers, and we're about to go into a world where the computers have learned to speak our language.
Well, I think we should leave it at that, because that was an absolutely great way to end this podcast, talking a little bit about almost the science fiction AI. That's my first time hearing a fictional Salesforce story that's not related to some sort of Salesforce project that someone's trying to accomplish, which also sometimes may turn into fiction. But I really, really appreciate both of your insights, and I'm looking forward to taking a look at the book myself. And for people who were not watching this and didn't see the QR code, where is the best place to get a copy of the book?
Yeah, so a couple of things you can do. Of course, we would encourage you to reach out and connect with myself and Andy or any of the authors that are on LinkedIn. Some of us are on X, more prevalent than others, but we're all on LinkedIn. But we have a very specific public group on LinkedIn named exactly the title of the book, ChatGPT for Accelerating Salesforce Development. But if you find us, you direct message us, you can't find the group for some reason, get to the group. The reason we're directing you to the group first is because there could be a monthly discount code. You could go straight to Amazon. You could scan the QR code and get there. If you do that between now and I think March 15th, depending upon when you're listening to this in the year of 2024, you would get 25% off the book. But later on in April or May or June, or if you're listening to this on the beach in July in the Dominican Republic, you could come find us on LinkedIn, go join our group, and look for the pinned messages in the group to go buy the book. Andy writes and publishes blogs, and I do as well. You can get more musings from us.
Yep. And look, we're always happy to talk to people about this. The reality is that if I could accurately predict the future, I'd have already done so, and I'd be on my private island somewhere. So it's always interesting to hear other people's insights into where this is going. As Joseph said, books on Amazon. We're fairly active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Well, Joseph is active on Twitter. I'm not, because Elon jammed my account up, and his support people won't fix it. But as long as Joseph is good about calling it X, that probably won't happen to him. So, great, and appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, especially as I know this is all time shifted, but for people that are listening, it's Sunday morning. That's when we were all available to do this, and I appreciate Ben and Joseph, both of you, taking the time to do this. And I feel like we need to regroup in a couple of months, Ben, after you've had a chance to take a look, after we've watched how some of this has evolved. You can have us back and then tell us where we were wrong and ask us why.
That sounds like a great plan, and I look forward to that. And Joseph and Andy, it's really been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much for your time, and everyone, please check out the book and let us know what you think.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Salesforce Radio. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting discussions, expert tips, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders. Stay connected with Titan, plus the power of the planet's leading CRM. See you next time.